also a separate topic, but also included in the oogenesis, ovarian cycle. So definition: cyclic changes which occur in the ovary after puberty known as ovarian cycle. Changes which occur in the ovary after puberty known as ovarian cycle. Usually it is of 28 days. The first is definition, duration 28 days plus minus some days. So from 1 to 4 days, 4 or 5 days, then 4 or 5 days to 12 days, and the 14th day, then 26th day, 28th day. So this ovarian cycle can be divided into various phases. Number one, the primary pre-antral period, then from 4 or 5 days to 12 the antral period, and 12 to 14 pre-ovulatory, then 14th day ovulation, then luteal phase, and this one is the ischemic phase. So these are various phases of the ovarian cycle: pre-antral, antral, pre-ovulatory, ovulation, luteal, ischemic. So what happened during pre-antral? So the definition, duration, phases. Now during first phase, that is the pre-antral period, during this period the about 20 primordial follicles, 20 primordial follicles they come out from the store of primordial follicles. So please note only about 20, round about 15 to 25. So round about 20 primordial follicles, they come out from the store of the follicles and they take part in the ovarian cycle. Other primary follicles, they remain in the same phase of the diplotein phase. So these follicles, this is the primary oocyte in the diplotein phase, surrounded by a single layer of follicular cells. Now these follicular cells, they become cuboidal. They become cuboidal in shape. So now the follicle is known as growing follicle. Now this follicle is known as growing follicle, grow कर रहा है, growing follicle. This is primordial follicle, this is growing follicle. Then these these follicular cells, they become multi-layered. बहुत ज़्यादा layers जो हैं, there several layers are formed in the follicles. Multi-layers. So these a transparent membrane is formed between the this oocyte and the cells, multiplying cells. This transparent membrane is known as zona pellucida. This is formed by contribution both from the oocyte and these cells. Now these cells, after multiplication, these cells are known as granulosa cells. Granulosa cells. So these are follicular cells. These name is changed now, granulosa cells. Now no follicular cells, these are granulosa cells, and the zona pellucida. Inside there is primary oocyte. Now in the primary oocyte, the stages, they are progressing from the diprotein, dikinesis, and then metaphase and the anaphase. In this way, they are progressing forward. Only in 20 primordial cells. Other cells which remain in the cortex of the ovary, they remain in the diprotein phase. So granulosa cells. So this follicle is known as primary follicle. This is known as primary follicle. So don't confuse between primary follicle and primary oocyte. Oocyte is concerned with the germ cell, and follicle concerned with the whole mass. So primordial follicle, growing follicle, primary follicle. So these are in the pre-antral period, and now from these granulosa cells outside there are the connective tissue cells known as theca cells. So these theca cells and granulosa cells, they start producing estrogen. They start producing estrogen, and it comes in the blood of the mother, and so this is now not the mother, sorry. So theca cells, they produce, and the granulosa cells, they produce estrogen, which through circulation reaches the endometrium of the uterus, and they control the different phases of the menstrual cycle. The next phase is the antral phase. The antral phase, now cavity is formed in the granulosa cells. In the granulosa cells, cavity is formed. This cavity is known as follicular antrum. This cavity is formed in the granular cells, and this cavity contains fluid, liquor, antrum. The outside there is theca cells, the zona pellucida, this is the primary oocyte. Now this follicle is known as secondary follicle. So when cavity is formed, follicle name is changed, secondary follicle, but inside there is oocyte. Still it is primary oocyte until first meiotic division is completed. When first meiotic division is completed, then it is known as secondary oocyte. Until first meiotic division is completed, is known as the primary oocyte. But follicle is known as secondary follicle. Now this cavity starts expanding, increasing in size, and the size of the whole follicle is also increasing more and more. And next phase, that is the pre-ovulatory phase. During this, the size of the follicle is increased. First meiotic division is completed. First meiotic division is completed, and the large size, the follicle is formed, and two daughter cells are formed. One capture whole cytoplasm and other remain as a nucleus without cytoplasm, and this is known as first polar body, and it remain within the zona pellucida. And now the so this is a large cavity known as follicular antrum, and these are the granulosa cells. And this is now known as secondary oocyte. First meiotic is completed. This is first polar body, zona pellucida. Then the theca cells, they are arranged into inner nuclear and outer, inner cellular, outer fibrous, theca interna and theca externa. interna, cellular, theca externa, the fibrous. So this is follicular antrum containing liquid folliculi. So this oocyte is pushed to one side due to this fluid, and these cells surrounding this oocyte, known as cumulus oophorus, and most immediate cells which are adjacent to the oocyte, known as corona radiata. Cumulus oophorus. These cells which are surrounding the oocyte, cumulus oophorus, out of these, most immediate cells which are surrounding this oocyte, known as corona radiata. So this is the part of the cumulus oophorus. Now this large size, the follicle, is known as tertiary follicle or Graafian follicle. Tertiary or Graafian follicle. So please note about 20 follicles, they take part in the ovarian cycle, but only one reaches up to the stage of tertiary or Graafian follicle. Other cells, about 19 cells, they are degenerated at various stages. Some are degenerated in the growing phase, some are in the primary follicle stage, some in the secondary follicle stage. Only one reaches a large size follicle. So now there is one Graafian follicle in the ovary, and now the second meiotic division is started in the oocyte. So what happens during pre-ovulatory? Size is increased and the theca is divided into two. First meiotic is completed, first polar body is formed, cumulus oophorus, and now the second meiotic is started in this oocyte, and the prophase and then the metaphase started, and during this phase, metaphase, now again division is arrested, metaphase of second meiotic division. Now the next phase, known as ovulation. Next phase, ovulation. So this is also a separate short note. Ovulation, definition: expulsion or discharge, expulsion, discharge, or release of or pushing out of the secondary oocyte from the ovary is known as ovulation. the expulsion, discharge, release or pushing out of the secondary oocyte from the ovary. So now this is expelled outside the surface of the ovary. This is known as ovulation, and it occurs on the 14th day of the cycle of the 28 days, and usually it occurs 14 days prior to next division. If there is this is of 28 days, so it occurs on the 14th day. If cycle is 29 days, it occurs on the 15 days. If cycle is 26 days, it occurs only on the 12th day. So the later 14 days are fixed, earlier days are not fixed, so it varies according to the total days of the cycle. So this is the definition. It occurs on the 14th day, and the cell is on the stage metaphase of the second meiotic division. And now this oocyte, secondary oocyte, and the polar body, zona pellucida, and some cells of the corona radiata. These three things are discharged, four things. So the secondary oocyte, polar body, zona pellucida, and few cells of cumulus oophorus known as corona radiata. These things are discharged, and the other parts of the graphene follicle are left behind, and left behind part is known as the corpus luteum. Left behind part, which contains the theca cells, theca layers, granulosa cells. Now these cells become the full of glycogen and the yellowish luteal cells, and they start producing progesterone. So this is the left behind part, theca interna, theca externa, granulosa cells, and only these parts are expelled out. And what is the reason of expulsion? Number one, the reasons of ovulation. Number one, the abrupt increased release of LH hormone from the pituitary gland. This is known as LH surge. Abrupt increased release of LH hormone known as LH surge. So due to this, the ovulation occurs, and this what it does. So if this is ovary and this is the graphene follicle, so here surface of the ovary becomes thin and weak. This point is known as stigma, and now, so this is the one reason, LH surge, stigma formation. and this also, LH surge also increase the pressure in the liquor antrum, and this pressure pushes the oocyte through the stigma outside the ovary. So due to mechanical pressure of the this liquor antrum, this is pushed out. So the weak point and the increased amount of liquid and the pressure in the liquid pushes the oocyte outside the ovary, and this is known as ovulation. So it occurs on the 14th day, and these things are released. Left behind part is known as corpus luteum, and reasons LH surge, stigma formation, and the mechanical pressure pushing the oocyte. So this oocyte is captured by the fallopian tubes. Now next phase is the luteal phase. Corpus luteum releases or excretes the progesterone, and which enters into the blood and reaches the uterus and controls the secretory phase of the menstrual cycle. So on the 26th day, if there is no fertilization, note, if no fertilization, so no stimulus to the corpus luteum, and it starts degenerating. It starts degenerating and defunctioning, and now release of the progesterone decreases, and ultimately the halted, and this is known as ischemic phase or the degenerative phase of the corpus luteum. And now the color of the corpus luteum becomes white. That's why it is known as corpus albicans. So this is the ovarian cycle, and the first is the pre-antral phase, then the antral phase, then the pre-ovulatory phase, then the ovulation, then luteal phase, then the degenerative or the ischemic phase, corpus albicans. So the bodies of the follicles which are degenerated before Graafian follicles are known as corpus atraticum. So there are three types of corpora: corpus atraticum, corpus luteum, corpus albicans. This is the ovarian cycle, and now next cycle starts after 28 days. Again 20 follicles, they come out and enter into the cycle, other remain. So these cyclic changes, they continues up to the age of menopause, when there is no ovarian cycle, that is about 45 to 50 years. 45 to 50 years. It means in the last cycle, when the 20 ovarian primordial follicles, they take part in the cycle, so those follicles, they remain in the diplotein phase of the first meiotic division. It means Deprotein phase of the prophase 1 can extend up to 45 to 50 years, longest phase. So only from the 50,000, 40 to 50,000 primordial follicles, only the 500 oocytes, they are ovulated, they are reaches the stage of Gassian follicle and they are ovulated. 500, the so only 500 cycles. So from 20 million to 500 only. These 500 becomes useful. Other they remain or they are sporting. So ovarian cycle. So the oogenesis never completes until fertilization. Mind it, oogenesis never completes until fertilization. So it remains in the secondary oocyte if there is no fertilization. So no completion of the second meiotic division. So no ovocytes are formed. It means fertilization is necessary to complete the oogenesis. So now the oogenesis is an interrupted process. It is interrupted in the before birth, then after birth, then after puberty, cyclic changes, then again in the menopause, so cycles are ceased, no further cycles. So this is how oogenesis interrupted process and starts in the intrauterine life.